We will be. Okay, so we're here on a Friday noon, and I want to have people remember that we will be Sunday, 11:30 to 1, Aikido Mountain View. That's an in-person indoor class. Okay. These are kind of like, we'll continue these because there's it's more of a, there's some movement, but it's just more of a discussion group ideally. So we can explore certain things, that oftentimes, the in-person contact classes are really important. But it's also important sometimes to broaden or deepen the study. So that's kind of the purpose of these online classes. And one of the things we've been kind of working on is standing on the Golden Bridge. Osensei's term, the floating bridge of heaven, Ame no Uki Hashi. And that's a pretty lofty one. So, my own personal term is Golden Bridge, okay? The way I kind of see it, it's a bridge from where you are, right here and now, to the finer, more original of you. So from I to I self to self or soul or spirit or many things that we can kind of go into. So how to stand there, okay? And one of the things that is important about that, you don't just stand there. You choose to stand there, which is one finer step. The expression Osensei used is Ame no Uki Hashi ni tatasarete. Tatasareru. Tatsu is to stand. Tatasareru is a complex of to give the Japanese language, it's like you can kind of shade it many different ways. So he didn't just say stand on the floating bridge of heaven. He used this construct that could, I would just say choose to stand. But the construct tatasareru is a complex one. And one time I think Ano Sensei said he might have used that just so people would not say, oh, we got to stand there. But it's two separate things. One, it sort of has a meaning that you make yourself suffer to stand there. It's just, sort of a tatasarete, tate, ame no uki hashi ni tatsu koto, matter of standing on the floating bridge, but ame no uki hashi ni tatasareru, or ame no uki hashi ni tatasarete. You are being made to suffer standing on that floating bridge. And so, one of the things that comes up for me right there is another thing you said was that, misogi is love protecting that sacred love. And, we're sacred love, we're talking more like with the expression kami no ai, more divine aspects of love. And it was explained to me once that the only reward you get for loving is you get to love some more. And oftentimes as you deepen, go more towards love, human love, to that more sacred level of love, everything inside us that's not loving tends to bubble up. And so, there's kind of this sense where, you have an idea of yourself as a loving person. And then all of a sudden, you maybe have a great experience, but then all of a sudden, this other stuff comes up. And so my sense a little bit of, tatasarete, sort of make yourselves to suffer standing on that floating bridge, is kind of a sense where you introspect and I wipe the slate clean. I am a pure being here. It's like, okay. And underneath that, there's more stuff that needs to be dealt with as we go from love to that more sacred love. And it bubbles up. And sometimes that's pretty, I would say it has a rather painful side to it. If you have to confront your own judgmental sense, your own inner hatred towards this or that or whatever. We have in this particular time period a wonderful device for that. It's our 45th president. I mean, and I think right here, there's a difference between judgment, which is kind of emotional, and I want to love everybody, but I have this judgmental sense, and discernment, discrimination. Osensei said, don't judge things good or evil, but he did not say there is no good, there's no evil. And so as we go back more towards that sacred sense of love, if I'm carried a lot of hatred and judgment towards somebody, and there might be reasons for it. But, to continue on deepening the experience of love, heading towards that sacred love. And I think that's a lot of what he meant by, being, made to suffer standing on the floating bridge of heaven. That's standing on that floating bridge of heaven is kind of that sacred love, which is much deeper than, a type of human love. So, we're moving towards ourselves as a more divine or more kami or whatever you want to call it. So anyway, that's just some things that have been coming up for me. Anybody with let me see, I think we have a couple of people. Yes. Okay. Anybody, before we start to move, which we are going to do in just a little bit, anybody with a comment or a question on that? It's by no means a finished product. Okay. But anybody have a question about that?
Not at this time, Sensei.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a point where I know Mary Heine Sensei always talks about Aikido as constant introspection. Because, just at the speed of whatever, I can get caught up in a judgment. And I'm caught there. I'm stuck there. And that shift, from judgment to what we might call a discernment, is a very important one. And, to some degree, I'm in love, or I love. That's an emotion. It can be a judgment, good judgment. Okay, but to go more towards the sacred nature of love, there's kind of a discernment process. And discernment is sort of the sword of Aikido. So that's constant, because we get caught up in the, we call it the lesser thought forms, of which judgment, hatred, intolerance, they're it's almost like they kind of are around, and then they activate the stuff in us that hasn't been dealt with. So as you kind of go back more towards the original, the finer level of yourself, it's almost like all this stuff that's been composting needs to be kind of recognized so that the final level of yourself can kind of bloom, so to speak. So that's my reading of, to suffer being made to stand on the floating bridge of heaven. But, my own process, if I'm going to stand on my own, which, I'm calling kind of like a golden bridge, then, that does come up. And so the way Hikizuchi Sensei used to call it kairi miru, hajiru, kuiru, osoru, satoru. And that's something that I've never come across in Osensei's words that have been translated and written down. But apparently that was something Osensei really stressed. And it's kind of like the 5 steps to enlightenment. The first one is just to introspect. Second one, repent. Third one, feel shame. Fourth, feel fear. Although the word osoru is not like standard fear. And then the last step is satoru, satori, enlightenment. So 5 steps. Okay. So one of the things that I've, because I hear these words and they're kind of grandiose, and we're really moving towards the last one. I want to be enlightened, right? But there's kind of like a shadow side to that process. Is that as you're going towards enlightenment or that more sacred nature of love or whatever, everything that's not, that's been kind of composting down there, comes up. So I think, the reflect, repent, feel shame, feel fear. Finally, there's that realization, that enlightenment. Everything, as we're moving towards that, and we're in constant motion towards that. Everything that's not that oftentimes comes up. And therefore, to continue on that path, whether it's towards Satori or towards that more sacred nature of love, or the truth of the universe in yourself, you see what I mean? There's an area right there where that's a constant process. And so there's kind of a, the Japanese term that Osensei used a lot was tanren. To refine, but at the same time to strengthen. There's an area where, you to stand on that floating bridge or the golden bridge or the path to sacred love or to enlightenment. As all that stuff that's composting down there starts to come up so that this can bloom, another level of it is a choice. So we're going to get up and move a little bit. Maybe we'll try to tie the actual movement to some of this. Okay. Anybody with a question or comment on any of that? That's a lot of stuff. So anybody? I mean, stuff like this, for example, like somebody said, well, where'd you learn? When I was in Japan, right? Where did you really learn what you learned? And I would say almost none of it was learned on the mat. A lot of this, Ano Sensei or Hikizuchi Sensei, they would bring up the things like this, when you were off the mat, just interacting, and how important these things were. And so, of course, the training was important too, because, other than that, just read books about it. But the training was kind of an application, laboratory, library, gymnasium, whatever you want to call it, a sacred space to pursue that path towards something even more sacred in yourself and whatever. And therefore, there's a navigation process. And, basically I can derail myself constantly with my own stupidity and judgment. I can get caught up in a lesser thought form at the speed of thought. And that triggers, of course, emotions in the body around that negative thought form. So choosing, maybe I'm like, choosing. Suffering, making yourself stand there on that sacred place, going towards the more sacred nature of yourself and therefore the universe. All right, it's a kind of, there's a little twist to the words. And he didn't say just stand there. He really mentioned you sort of suffer, causing or making yourself stand there. And one time, Mary Hani Sensei, is with Hikizuchi Sensei, and he's using, Ameno Uki Hashi tatasarete koto. Aikido is a matter of, suffering yourself to stand on that bridge, making yourself. And so she asked him, who or what makes you stand there? And as I remember from what she said, he blew up. He got really angry. But that's a good question. It's like a Zen koan. Who or what causes you to suffer standing in that more sacred place? Okay? Anyway, so set the table for something. So I'm going to start out with some staff movement. Okay? Now, what we'll do, because it's important to keep this going, we'll kind of start out in kind of a warm-up with the basic 30 movement misogi or gyo. Okay? So I'm going to do a side view here. Okay, front, back. It starts out with movement number 1. And movement number 2. And movement number 3. Movement number 4 up on the toes and flop. Movement number 5. Ready position here. Movement number 6. Boom, there's that thrusting motion. Movement number 7 is both up and down. Movement number 8, boom, free thrust. Movement number 9, right side cut. And left side cut. They're all thumbs face away. That's the first change. Now we switch the second change, thumbs face each other. Movement 11, cover. Movement 12, thrust, boom. Movement 13, boom. Movement 14, thumbs face you. That's the third change. Movement 16, we're back to the first change. Now we go second change again. Here, here. Remember here, I'm using this as a spear. So you have to rotate the hip and have some consciousness of where the spear point would be. Back. Here, now this is movement number 22. This is Gokyo. Thumb is up, but the blade is positioned here. Movement 23. We go back to the first change, rotates the hip, down, up and across, and back. 23. 24, here. 25, first of the fire water changes. Right hand thumb down from the top. 26. Here. 27, fire water change, but thumbs face away. 28, boom. 29, thumbs face away. Watch the spirit point. Thumbs face, and movement number 3. Okay, so we'll go through that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's both up and down. 8, rethrust. 9, and 10. That's all first change. Thumbs face away. Thumbs face. Second change. 11, 12, 13. Now, thumbs face you. 14, 15. Now thumbs face again. 16. Back to the first chain. 17. Fourth change. Not in the hands. It's in the body. It's almost like I'm thinking myself, I'm standing in a gravity well. My mass doesn't change, but my weight would, energetic weight. Back to the second change. Back, front. Now remember here, this is theoretically a sphere, so make sure you rotate the hip. Don't swing it too much out there. But here it's already behind me. Step back. Here. Now, this is movement number 22. This is Gokyo. 23. 24. 25. 26. 27. Is that change? Thumbs face away though. 28. Back to the first change. 29. Thumbs face. Thumbs face away. Thumbs face. And 30. Okay. So go over that. See, you may have known it in the past, but if you don't practice it, or just kind of refresh it, you lose it. So take a moment or two and refresh, review, or just practice it. Okay. So we have the 30 movement Misogi Gyo. I don't call it a kata. Okay. Anybody question or? So, there's a certain area where the first level of it, you study it. The hand changes. Thumbs face away. First change. Thumbs face. Second change. Thumbs face you. Third change. The hands are in the first change position, but the fourth change is formed. Again, your mass doesn't change, but if you were all of a sudden on Jupiter, your weight would shift. And if we were to use or twist Mr. Einstein's theories, you're standing in a gravity well. Your mass wouldn't change, but boom, your weight would. That's the fourth change. It's Yonkyo, where people kind of think about Yonkyo as kind of jam a nerve, but really, boom. Okay? All right. Fifth change. I'll do this one. Position the blade. You don't do this. But this is, again, let's just say that, you know, there's I go this way, which would, you know, kind of be, okay, if I go this way, there's EQ, but there's a sharp blade that, you know, it's a weapons taking, I get cut. So here, you rotate that away. That's why I would call this the Gokyo change. And it sets up the, you know, basically what it is, just a figure eight. So, okay. Okay. So anybody with a, you know, that's study. Now the actual practice of it, you're kind of in the gymnasium or the dojo. You take your study and you become clearer on it through your physical movements. That's the beginnings of it. Okay. Anybody with a question or comment on the 30?
Just a comment that, per usual, the more times I do it in a row, the flow gets stronger with each repetition.
Well, you see, that's what makes it a misogi. If you just do the rote movements again and again, you get a little exercise. And the problem with it is a lot of times you learn it a certain way. You learn it in a rigid pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, all right. So if you're noticing that the movement flows a bit more, you are in the pattern of it. But that's the purpose of repetition. Not just to repeat it, but all of a sudden you're in a flow. If you do a Tai Chi, you do a beginning set. Oh, that was good. But then you do a second set, or maybe a third set, or maybe a fourth set. And your interior sense of flow strengthens. That's what makes it a misogi. And there are other reasons I use that term, or yo. You go from a kind of a more of a mechanical, mental, with some physical to it, to all of a sudden there's a transformation happening. You become not just that you're flowing, the movement flows better towards you, but is he or she who's beginning to stand in a flow or in a flow. Okay, that's a good observation there. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. Now, the second half of that, which I start with the Gokyo change. The first half is just to show the changes 1 through 5. They sort of correspond to, you know, the Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yonkyo, Gokyo. They sort of do, okay? But you know, just after the 5th, we go from here to the double figure 8 and boom. Okay. So I'd like you to go from movement 22 to the end. Boom, 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 boom. and work that in sequence a bit. Okay. So, basically that last section was designed as kind of like a stepping off point. You have the 5 changes in the first part. And then right about there, you kind of step off of that into, for want of a better term, another dimension, potentially. I mean, initially, you just approach it as you're learning more movements in a sequence. Okay? But anybody on that last sequence?
Hi, Sensei, this is Cliff again.
Yes, yes.
I noticed that when I do it as a loop, just like over and over and over, like it was one continuous thing, the energy level increases with each iteration.
Yeah, no, that again is important. That's why it's not a kata. Now, one of the things, we go back to, those 5 steps to enlightenment. Kairi miru is to reflect. See, you're getting this because you're practicing. You see what I mean? And you could think about it, or but we all have a tendency to be lazy or judgmental, which prevents us from actually practicing. And so, it's almost like, we ran all of a sudden. There are various thought forms, one way of kind of looking at the eye. Well, and the ones that we practice the most are magnet. They're more strongly magnetized, and laziness is one. I know I should do it, but I don't. Okay, that. Okay. Or, I got a bunch of other stuff, so I'm kind of annoyed. Annoyance, laziness, those are thought forms. And of course, the laziness is inside of a thought form couldn't attack, but with a thought form out there, which is energy, emotion, is, there's something in me that's attracting that. I'm not going to practice enough to get to the level of flow, nor am I going to feel more energy in the movement. So that's kairi miru. That's to reflect. If I don't reflect, I think, I've been pretty lazy lately. In fact, I've been kind of annoyed at myself underneath because I've been so lazy about this. Okay. The second one, repent. God, that can just really derail me. Yeah. So I'm lazy about this. I'm lazy about other things. So, it's reflection. And, and this is kind of funny. You don't beat yourself up, but I'm that way. So, you're feeling a little bit of shame. The way that Osensei puts it, feel it, not just, oh yeah, I know I'm feeling. I'm shameful about that. Feel it. Now the Osoru is different. The Osoru is like I'm capable of things like flow and energy, and I spend a substantial amount of my time being in these negative thought forms that limit me. That's kind of scary, isn't it? In fact, it's not your normal fear. It's more like it cuts through all those thought forms. And, it's kind of a stock, maybe understanding of the term Satori, but you clear. Things are clear, they're transparent. And then, you pick it up and boom, 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 boom. So that would be kind of my particular use of those, the 5 steps to enlightenment, so to speak. Tojima Sensei, actually, when he was here in 1979, he went through, basically everything through fear. And it was at the end of class, and so he cracked everybody. He says, but we won't make it to enlightenment tonight. He didn't want to tackle it, or he just kind of make a point about that, because that's a very individual thing. So anyway, anybody, because we're going to move on in just a second or two, anybody with a question or comment on that last section? Yeah, hello?
Hi,
No?
words yet.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, I'm still dealing with technical issues with this new
No,
microphone.
it's okay. Don't worry about it. Let's get up then. Okay, all right. Now, and what that is sort of meant to do is to inspire you to go into a freer sense of it. See, what happens is, you can ritualize it, boom, and people kind of like to count the numbers off and put it in a group. It's kind of a group energy, okay? Like, a lot of times sports teams, they kind of go here and they pray before they get out there. And that's fine, or high-fiving, that's a ritual, all right? But you can always tell when somebody's like that and somebody really is involved in it. You see what I mean? So, boom, boom, boom. Now these are, all I'm doing is taking the fire water changes. You can get the figure 8. Boom, go this way, go this way, go this way. As you continue to do that, then all of a sudden you go into this or that. One-handed figure 8. I try to make sure, for example, that if there's a sharp point here, in fact, after a while, the staff becomes a part of you. It's like saying, okay, and it becomes good practice for getting off a line. Even though what you're getting off the line to is your own motion. Boom, boom, boom. So this is a little step past just getting involved in the form. Cliff was feeling more flow as he repeated the form. If you just do the form once, you remember it sort of, but if you repeat it a couple of times, hopefully you start to feel something. Oh yeah, it's starting to flow more. I'm feeling more in my flow. There's a big step there. So, the movements are better. The movements are connecting this flow. But all of a sudden, I'm feeling more flow. That's what, it's important to kind of get that. And, there are degrees of it. And then all of a sudden, we go here, boom, boom. For me, that's more fun, therefore there's more energy. Okay, and to me, this feeling more flow, and now I'm feeling more energy. Okay, we are choosing to do something that maybe you think about, but how many times do you practice it? But we're we're stuffing ourselves to stand on our bridge. So the more flow, that's me towards a finer level of me. More energy, that's me towards a finer level of me. So all of a sudden, these are the first couple of steps are baby steps. But what is it? Guess what? We're in choice. We're choosing to do this. It's intentional. And things come up like I haven't done this in a while and I can't. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, this is another step. See, this is basically these motions. Okay? Now you go the opposite. You go this way. Go this way. And some of these movements. We're doing a little bit. See, I do the two-hand figure eight quite a bit. And off of that, I work the fire water changes. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. So give yourself, give yourself permission. Now, sometimes you pick this up and all of a sudden all this negative stuff comes up like, I don't know if I can do that. I keep repeating the same stuff, okay? See, that's something in there that's composting so something can start to blossom. But again, one thing you're dealing with which is composting coming up. And you're choosing or suffering to make yourself feel, I feel so stupid and yeah. Okay. So give yourself permission. I like that a little bit more than suffering to make yourself do this. All right. Okay. So beginnings of the what I call the take rusu level. Okay, so that's another level of practice. And some things may come up like, I'm not comfortable, or I don't know if I'm doing this right, and I don't know if I should be doing this, So I think of those as like negative thought forms. And they're around constantly. But they only exist and attach because there's something inside us that's the composting coming up. Good example. local, but now international, Stephen Curry of Golden State Warriors. He was always told he's too small, too frail, never make it, wasn't offered a scholarship to any, really major basketball place like Duke or UCLA or whatever it is, Kentucky. He got one walk, he was said, you can walk on, but we're not going to give you a scholarship. So little Davidson College, Bob McKillop, the coach there, offered him a scholarship. And they asked him why. He said, well, everybody watched this kid. And they said, he's too small. He's too this, too that. But when I saw him, I saw genius. And so, there's an area where one thing he did do, so all that negative stuff, you're too small, you're too frail, that was energy. That was down there, that was in that compost heap down there. He brought it up and he blossomed, didn't he? And so that's a pretty good model for us. Osensei, frail as a child, small, primarily due to his mom through the age of 9. He was very, very mental. And his father said, get out there, do sumo on beaches. I don't want you to just be an introvert. So he got out there and he got kicked around for a little bit. Then he started to get really good, really fast. And so he started to appreciate the body. And, he got to where he was like basically 5 foot by 5 foot in his physical prime. He was 5 foot and 180 pounds. Okay, so that's pretty impressive. But it's not the physical growth. It's just that almost like there was something. I'm sure he heard that he was too this or too that. And it was all compost, wasn't it? Nado Sensei calls it downtime, so refuel. Okay, anybody right there? Anything come up for you? Because that is important. After a while, what comes up for you. Too lazy, I should do more. Yeah, that can fuel you. Okay. Anybody come up with something? Or, you may not today, but if you continue that, you'll kind of run into your stuff, so to speak. And it's your stuff, just as this is my stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
So since this last bit of talk makes a lot of sense with some of what was occurring to me at the start of today's class.
Okay.
About the nature of mingling with, I guess, the parts of ourselves that are made to stand on the floating bridge of heaven, and in that deeper, truer I sense, and then the little I, and so what I'm seeing is a dance between the form of the big, deep, universal, I am the universe kind of I, that is standing on the floating bridge of heaven, and the really little I that Nado Sensei would sometimes refer to as Bobby, the dang it, I stubbed my toe and right, gross, grouse, all that kind of whaley by.
Yeah.
And
But go on.
Well, so it seems to me that one of the tensions that comes up for me in the practice of Aikido is the want, or at least I notice the impulse in myself to want to distance myself from the whaley I of the little I in order to get bigger and deeper into the big I. And at the same time, I wrestle with a different part of me knows that no, what the big I actually wants to do is pick up the little I and give it a hug and I don't know, a milkshake or something like that. and like let the polarity of fire and water balance out through me.
Okay.
But yeah, all the words just went away. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. The tricky area right there, is a bridge. And, we kind of want to hang around the more, how shall I put it, the more, to us, the attractive levels of who we are. Okay. But there's probably a tremendous amount of energy all along that bridge. And what derails people more than anything else is they can't handle the lower states. And so one, thing that came up for me was that oftentimes we get caught up, everything that's in here, like, let's just say, I'm frustrated. Well, there's frustration in here, I go to prepare coffee and all of a sudden I put the beans in the grinder and, and I put, when I grind them, I put them in the filters and I put it in the hot water. The whole thing just collapses and I got to clean the whole floor out because it's filled with water and coffee grinds and everything like that. And it seems like sometimes, what happens is chaos like that. And then, my eye gets real small and says, oh, the universe is out to get me today. And then, of course, I bump my head and something. And, it's almost like a chain of reactions that really, and so right about there, what happens is that, I'm definitely in a very, this is past Bobby to negative Bobby, or past Jackie to negative Jackie, right? But, in a sense, the fact that all this stuff is moving around means there's a lot of energy there. And so what I'm saying a little bit is that maybe what we should do is to say, and you kind of want to give a hug to that smaller one, okay? But I would say that at some point you want to embrace it, because that's where a lot of the transformational energy is. If you're kind of in the finer of yourself, you're there. But there's such movement. And therefore, being able to handle, I want to stand up, but I'm too lazy. I just want to sit here and vegetate. Okay. But, all of a sudden, the laziness in me is creating a thought form outside, or energies that are in that thought form. So I'm even lazier than I need to be. So, yeah, I'm being lazy. Reflect. Yeah, a certain amount of shame, I'm not doing this or that. Yeah. Yeah, I repent. I'm capable of so much more than I'm currently doing. That's right. And then there's kind of the osoto, the fear. It's like, whoa. And then there's, it's like the fear burns away a lot of that stuff. Not, I'm afraid, it's like a whoa realization, and boom, all of a sudden, whatever the Satori is part of that clarity. And really what's upsetting me is kind of like this thought form or energy I'm in that is reinforced by something in me. And I could blame the world out there for this and that, but it's also something in me that's creating this thought form, which is influencing reality and making things more chaotic or unsettled or whatever. A man named Gurdjieff, he basically was talking about something called the soul. Okay, pretty soon it falls asleep so quickly. And the other thing is, there's a book called In Search of the Miraculous by a man named Uspensky. And it was Gurdjieff's awareness groups in Moscow and Petersburg pre-Russian Revolution, where there was all this energy coming up. And he kind of flatly said, it's like, all important work, in terms of transformation and consciousness, occurs in the midst of a lot of turmoil. Like all of a sudden, there's that stupid noise out there, disrupting what we're saying. So it's very easy. And that energy right there, which is very upsetting, we go into judgment, we go into even hatred, is the fuel. That's just indicating there's some compost. But we miss the Satori, the blooming. You see? And so, in some sense, it's a good honesty factor. It keeps us very honest because, I would like to go into these finer dimensions and being out there and ignore a lot of that stuff. But, the substance of life and also awareness teachers often tell you something, use it. Use Donald Trump. He's a great, he stirs up so much. Okay. So, Kyle Rittenhouse. We have a whole bunch of things going on right now. We have the pandemic. So, I don't know if that helps out or anything. One thing that I kind of was talking about on, I got to post it because I thought it was a good class on Wednesday. It's an innovation, so you grab it. Your energies around. I'm doing also exactly the energies are your angels or your allies or whatever you want to call it. And what I kind of said a little bit, it's kind of interesting. I know I'm pretty good when it starts to kind of amaze myself. But, it's way too infrequent for me. When something really gets my notice about the way the energies move, I scare myself in a good way. Oh, sort of, whoa, wow. So that part of it is, that's been coming up for me the last couple of days, is that, we get caught up in the things about the thought forms. As you become conscious of them, it ceases to have power over you in that moment. It's not that they won't come back, but you establish a pattern that is of kind of being conscious of it. Boy, I'm lazy. Yeah, there's laziness in you, like there's in everybody. But when I'm more conscious of that, the thought form, which is making it even more, starts to dissipate. There's clarity for that moment. If I, introspect and everything like that, I spend way too much time in this thought form. That's scary. And then before you've cleared it, they'll come back. There are thought forms around stupidity, there are thought forms about being judgmental in a negative way, there are thought forms about being stubborn, there are thought, so all these things. So, what I'm saying is that there's tremendous amounts of energy there. If you kind of run, come in this stubborn, or being irritated. Yeah, there's part of me that is irritated about things, but I don't have to feed that with the thought form energy. So if I can just sort of become a bit more conscious of it, I spend at least a lot of my energy, my soul force being stupid or being lazy or being judgmental, and then that energy of that finer state of me can actually start to bloom, blossom, bloom, manifest, whatever you want to call it. Osensei talked about the 3,000, was it the 5-petal lotus that bloomed simultaneous in 3,000 worlds. Boom. And I'll bet for him the last step before that was Satori. Was that not I'm afraid of, but more that wow type of thing, you know. Yeah, I think, like all greats, whether it's Stephen Curry, in this basketball, which is more popular culture here and now, or Osensei in his day, they know how to use the negative to fuel, but it's compost. And so, that part of it is very difficult, because I would also like a more an enlightened world, but we don't get that until everybody starts to learn how to reprioritize, taking all that tremendous energy in us that is composting, because a lot of times it drags us down, compost, as opposed to, okay, it's composting. There's a blooming process. Of course, then it creates more compost, boom, boom, boom. So we're in a creative cycle. And, as we clear out those thought forms, we're more intelligent. Our imagination is present to help us solve difficulties. I have more energy. I have more flow. And it's a conscious choice. And to some degree, in the real negative times, or when the negative thought forms, I am making myself suffer standing on that golden bridge. So we did a little bit of work here. Before we break, is there anybody with a question, or that annoying noise out there? That's another way of practicing. The world will throw you all this stuff, push you into negative states. So we get a chance to practice quite a bit these days. Anybody, before we break? Cliff, anything you want to add, or? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of something a few minutes ago, but now I can't remember what it is. I think the noise is in my head. Yeah, it's gone. If I think of it on Sunday, I'll tell you. But
yeah, okay, sure.
yeah,
Okay.
I had an insight, but it got beeped out of my brain by the beep beep sound.
Well, insights are, two things. So one is soaking. The other one is to let them go, so they come back even deeper. It's just part of soaking as well. Okay. Thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, I had one thought just now, actually.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which is, I liked what you said about the bridge, not just focusing on enlightenment. I think the Western view of enlightenment is very goal-oriented, like so much of Western thought. And I think that what we're doing is what we're doing, right? Like, I mean, you do Aikido and you get better at it, and maybe you become more like an enlightened person. But it seems to me, if you don't focus on what you're doing, then you're constantly focused on what you want to transform into. I mean, not to go into something blind and purposeless, but to focus on where you are, right? And today's goal, like right now, I'm doing this 30 movement form. Okay, I'm just going to do the 30 movement form and notice what happens. And I think that's really hard for Americans, especially to try and do, because we're like, I'm doing this 30 movement form so I can get better at whacking people with sticks, or I'm doing this 30 movement form so I can get enlightened and be the most enlightened person ever, and it's like, nah, I'm here. The stick's here. The room is here. I'm swinging it. This is what is happening. And I try to focus more on that, I think. because it's hard.
What I would focus on, also is I am da 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 da. We're really focusing on I am. And so, as opposed to how I'm doing, which is more a goal-oriented view, I am. Who am I in this moment? I'm standing in thought form around sort of being negative and very judgmental about the world. Okay. But as I become more conscious of it, I realize how that limits me. Because when I am in that thought form, I am in a very ordinary place, not seeing any sort of solutions to anything. I feel stuck. Okay? That's the Osensei's one by one or even smaller. So, while being conscious of it, all of a sudden, the feel shame, the feel fears of, whoa, that's a wake-up call. In fact, I think you can go to fear pretty quick. Okay. And all of a sudden, that thought form doesn't hold that much power over me. And there may be others that flash in there, but being kind of judgmental and ordinary and feeling oppressed and stuck. That's pretty common. But then I get into being lazy. Okay. Quick process. See, when I become conscious, the whole thing about those 5 steps is that you become conscious. And when you become conscious of, I'm not that laziness, although there may be laziness inside me. Right? But I don't want to say I am lazy. There's a lazy side to me. Which means there are other sides. And that moment that I can clear out that thought form of being lazy, if I can be more conscious of it, ooh, boy. This clarity shows, this transparency shows. And my gateway to it is, to some degree, a pretty ordinary negative state. And that's hard to do. But the Misogi Osensei was talking about, Hikizuchi Sensei's words were Shinken Shobu, live blade training. That guy, one time, he was explaining the 5 steps to me. So I kind of said, well, should I do that before I go to bed or when I wake up in the morning? He got really pissed and he said, no, it's ongoing. It's Shinken, it's in the moment. I went, oh, okay. And then I forgot it. Okay, so I don't know, anything more?
No, not at this time.
Yeah, no, this is sometimes, you just, enough is enough. Even something good. Good. Other than that, I get caught up in thought forms around, wanting to prolong something. Oh, this is so good, I want to hold on to it, which is the thought form. And what does that do? Inevitably, things kind of shift and I get caught up into negative thought forms. So even the good ones, wow, this is pretty cool. You appreciate the hell out of them and you release them, you become more conscious of it. So something even better potentially can come. Okay? Anyway, thank you all for tuning in today.